As the chaos of war escalated in Ukraine, one unexpected force emerged to shape the battlefield. Canada, with a bold strategy unlike any seen before, reshaped the rules of international support. On August 24, during a pivotal moment, the Independence Day celebrations in Kyiv, Mark Carney unveiled a staggering military aid package exceeding $2 billion. This announcement was just the beginning of a determined effort to stand against tyranny. But the very next day, the Canadian government sprang into action again, pledging an extraordinary $500 million to bolster NATO's procurement of American weaponry. The momentum didn't stop there. A substantial cybersecurity initiative was revealed, bringing the initial total to $2.6 billion. This was not merely a transfer of money, it was a lifeline delivered at a critical moment. In less than a month, the first tranche found its way to Ukraine's treasury, a rapid response crafted to meet urgent needs for ammunition and salaries during the war's peak intensity. Imagine the disbelief in the Kremlin as their calculations of aid delays crumbled before this lightning-fast financial intervention. It was as if a missile had struck, directly targeting the heart of Russia's attrition tactics. But the sheer scale of Canada's operation would soon escalate far beyond this initial aid package. Since the war's onset in February 2022, Canada has committed a staggering $22 billion in total aid, making it the third largest contributor to Ukraine, behind only the United States and the United Kingdom. Out of this monumental sum, approximately $12.4 billion has been allotted directly to support Ukraine's state budget, while military assistance has included everything from M777 howitzers to armored personnel carriers and advanced air defense systems. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have received critical combat training on Canadian soil. The numbers reveal a tale of resilience and an unwavering commitment. As the situation intensified, Canada prepared to unleash even more funding for cybersecurity and energy infrastructure, illustrating that this was just the beginning of a relentless campaign. Could this strategic move tilt the scales of an entire war? The tension built as the West united, sending a clear and powerful message to those who threaten freedom. Time was ticking, and a fierce battle loomed on the horizon. Canada's arsenal of support didn't stop with tanks and training. It surged forward with billions more earmarked for cybersecurity shields, energy fortress protections, and drone swarm creations. And this? This roar from a single ally echoed a brutal truth across the icy wastes of Russia. Imagine the Kremlin's war room, shadows flickering under dim bulbs, the scent of stale cigarettes and desperation clinging to the air. You're not just facing Ottawa's resolve, Vladimir. You're locked in a deathmatch against the G7's colossal wealth machine. How long before your ammo crumbles and their vaults overflow, endless and merciless? When Russia's own national treasure chest was emptying like a leaky fire bucket, feeding the grinder of war, one nation's pledge struck like a thunderclap, shattering Putin's timetable fantasy. He hoarded shells, they multiplied digits. And guess what? The numbers devoured him whole. But the masterstroke? The cunning blueprint behind those funds. No strings attached to fancy gear or vanity projects. Straight into Ukraine's lifeblood accounts. This shattered the playbook, rewriting every rule in the economic arena. Picture the Ukrainian government's hands freed, paying soldiers' wages while the crisp paper whispers through fingers, settling pensions with the rustle of stability, keeping lights on in schools amidst the distant rumble of conflict, hospitals humming with the busy click of hope. What primal shift did this unleash? Ukraine now funneled every hryvnia and foreign dollar directly into steel and fury, zero diversions to civilian cushions. Canada's infusion kept the nation breathing, transforming native funds into lethal lances. In the realm of finance, it mirrored the ultimate battlefield tactic, the force amplifier. Each scarlet maple dollar amplified a Ukrainian one twofold, threefold, sending shockwaves to the frontline trenches where mud-caked boots and gunfire barked feral commands. Yet, as this economic storm brews, what twisted path awaits Russia's crumbling regime, teetering on the abyss of ruin, in the wake of Canada's torrent of gear, from M777 howitzer cannons to Leopard 2 behemoths, armored hulks, and swift air shields, hundreds of brave Ukrainians honed their edge on Canadian earth. The scent of gunpowder lingered, the echo of drills reverberating like distant thunder, skin chapped from relentless grips. But this was merely prelude to the cataclysm unveiled. Canada's gambit morphed a skirmish into a savage economic blitzkrieg, pitting ideologies against each other in a grinding, no-holds-barred confrontation. No longer merely land and border lines, what blood-soaked legacy would define the 21st century's clash?
How could one nation's lifeline birth such a transformative hurricane?
Beyond the fresh 2.6 billion surge, colossal sums loomed for digital fortresses, power grid bulwarks, and unmanned skyhunters. And this solitary nation's vow screamed a devastating salvo into Moscow's frozen core. The Kremlin's maps trembled, the air thick with the metallic tang of impending doom, chairs creaking under weighty fears. It's no sprint against Canada alone.
Putin, it's an annihilation against the G7's infinite coffers. Victory odds? Utterly nil.
Your arsenal dwindles like fading embers while theirs piles eternal, unyielding. As Russia incinerated the final ashes of its wealth vault to fuel the beast of battle, one G7 pledge landed like a crushing avalanche, eroding Putin's gradual victory mirage. Shells tallied, zeros multiplied. And in this arithmetical duel, the zeros claimed supremacy. Yet the pivotal brilliance lay in the calculated intent. These dollars unbound, not shackled to exotic armories or fleeting endeavors, poured raw into Ukraine's veins.
A revolutionary pivot, flipping the economic throne entirely.
Soldiers' purses swelled with quiet clinks of earned coins, pensions unlocked doors to warmth against the biting chill, hospitals pulsed with life-saving rhythms, schools buzzed with young voices defying the chaos.
What seismic change erupted?
Ukraine redirected its full taxation river and allied assistance straight into the forge, no sliver spared for social harbors, focusing all on missile roar, bullet buys, and bold assaults.
Canada's flow sustained the nation's heartbeat, refining domestic wealth into piercing spears. Economically, it embodied the force doubler of war doctrine.
Every Canadian note resonated, magnifying a Ukrainian counterpart 2-3 times over, amplifying tremors to frontline mirrors where earth squelched under heavy treads and fates hung by threads.
Yet, as this financial vortex tightens, poised to drown an empire in insolvency, what desperate, self-inflicted wounds will Putin unleash next to stave off the inevitable plunge? As Ukraine grappled with the weight of conflict, the tide of war shifted dramatically.
In a captivating twist, Canada emerged not just as an ally, but as a formidable force that redefined the very landscape of this ongoing battle. The stakes transcended mere borders. This was a showdown between contrasting ideologies and financial strengths. On one side stood Ukraine, buoyed by an unyielding treasury that underscored its resilience amidst adversity. This treasury's might extended well beyond what one might expect from the financial giants of the G7.
Its essence lay in the influence over the global financial system, the status of the dollar as a reserve currency, and an unparalleled ability to borrow, backed by a market confidence rooted in the rule of law.
Imagine the sound of cash flowing into the market, a thunderous roar that announces a turning tide.
Trillions can be injected swiftly when needed, resources mobilized at an astonishing pace. This is the kind of flexibility that is simply out of reach for Russia.
Consequently, Canada's decisive action spoke volumes, revealing just how impactful even a fraction of this economic power could be when deployed strategically. It sent a chilling message to Putin. His reliance on brute force was met with an intelligent, calculated strategy that would unravel his ambitions. Conversely, on Russia's end, a stark reality emerged. Depleted coffers, an economy strangled by sanctions, and aging military hardware from the Soviet era filled their arsenal. The whispers of even the wealthiest oligarchs painted a grim portrait of an economy on the brink of collapse. The Kremlin's long-standing narrative that time and perseverance would favor them was shattered by the concrete figures unveiled by Canada, exposing the fragility of their resolve. As Canada stood firm, pouring resources into Ukraine, it signified not merely financial assistance but a clarion call of defiance against tyranny. Did Russia ever anticipate that their belief in outlasting the West would crumble under the weight of statistics? The balance of power was tilting, and the implications were staggering. As the balance of power tilted insidiously against Vladimir Putin, he found himself cornered, with only one card left to play. It was a gamble not grounded in military might but a delusion that the West's resolve would falter before Russia's supply of ammunition. He was banking on distractions, voter pressures, and the exhausting grind of prolonged conflict. Time, he believed, would tip the scales in his favor. But from an unexpected ally, a new strategy emerged that would reshape the chessboard entirely. Canada suddenly transformed the landscape of international support. With a striking commitment, the nation provided an astonishing $2.6 billion in military aid to Ukraine in just 1 month. This was no fleeting gesture. The entire package offered a staggering $22 billion. To dismiss this as mere financial assistance would be like mistaking a nuclear missile for a firecracker. The impact was vast and profoundly strategic. On August 24, during Ukraine's Independence Day, the Canadian envoy, Mark Carney, unveiled a revolutionary military aid plan that sent shockwaves through the Kremlin.
This generous influx, quick as lightning, was designed not just for combat but to invigorate Ukraine's very economy.
Within weeks, the country received critical funds that would ensure salaries were paid, hospitals remained open, and soldiers were armed and paid. This was no ordinary aid, it was an unforeseen economic blitz that shattered Kremlin expectations, throwing Putin's strategy into chaos. The potency of Canada's commitment was not only in its speed, but its scale and strategic genius. With total aid amounting to $22 billion, Canada positioned itself as a major supporter of Ukraine, coming in right behind the United States and the United Kingdom. This massive influx of cash empowered the Ukrainian government to fund essential services without diverting military funds, allowing the nation to mobilize its resources effectively and swiftly against the onslaught.
As Canadian dollars flowed into Ukraine's treasury, they transformed into a mighty weapon.
This support dramatically changed the trajectory of a war that was no longer just about territory, but rather about contrasting ideologies and systems on a global scale. Ukraine stood tall, backed by the robust economic might of the G7, while Russia struggled to keep pace, clutching at its dwindling resources as desperation set in.
What would Putin do next?
The truth is, he found himself boxed in, devoid of favorable options.
The only choices left seemed bleak, driving the Kremlin deeper into a quagmire of desperation.
Any counter-move he could attempt would merely tighten the economic noose around Russia's neck, accelerating the strategic stranglehold the West was tightening. With Europe decoupling itself from reliance on Russian energy, Putin's supposed economic weapons became dull and ineffective.
What remained?
Only the option to seize what few Western assets were left in Russia, a mere drop in the bucket against a trillion-dollar economy. Such actions would not only fail to bring the West to its knees but would instead serve to isolate Moscow further.
So, would he raise military stakes? Mobilizing millions of conscripts appeared attractive in theory, but in reality, it was an act of folly.
Each soldier dispatched to the front lines would mean one less laborer or farmer, further crippling an already straining civilian existence. Factories would close, agricultural production would falter, and the whole economic structure would begin to crumble. Every desperate move Russia made merely compounded its predicament, ensuring the nation would spiral further into economic chaos while the West held the upper hand in this high-stakes game.
As the clock ticked down, Putin's brutal force strategy faced an unmatched avalanche of economic prowess that rendered it futile.
It was not just about winning a war, it was a battle for survival in a landscape forever altered by the overwhelming power of economics and strategy. As the battlefield shifts dramatically against him, Vladimir Putin finds himself cornered, grasping for desperate measures. His military strategy, once so robust, is now strained amid dwindling resources. The Cold War of attrition has started, and the West is far from exhausted. Rather, it has responded with an unexpected turn that reshapes the very dynamics of international support. In a stunning display of resolve, Canada stepped up, rewriting the playbook of global aid. On Ukraine's Independence Day, amidst celebrations, the announcement of a staggering $2.6 billion military aid package was made. This was not just a one-time gesture but the precursor to an avalanche of support, totaling a jaw-dropping $22 billion. Such an immense financial commitment was akin to hurling a missile straight into the heart of Russia's attrition strategy. What sets the strategy apart is its speed. Traditional aid mechanisms could take months, even years, but Canada acted swiftly. $2.6 billion was dispatched to Ukraine before anyone could even blink. This cash infusion brought vital resources to a nation in dire need, challenging Kremlin assumptions that the West would falter under prolonged pressure. As it turns out, time does not favor Putin, it favors the strategic might of coordinated Western support.
The scale of Canada's commitment, ranking third among G7 donors, fundamentally alters the economic landscape. This funding empowers Ukraine not just to defend but to thrive amidst chaos, transforming each Canadian dollar into a force multiplier on the front lines.
But behind the numbers lies a strategic doctrine far more profound.
The new economic warfare seeks to dismantle not only Russian military strength but the entire economic foundation upon which it stands.
With every dollar sent to Ukraine, the West chips away at Russia's financial stability, forcing it into a fatal expenditure race.
Amid this chaos, what will Putin's next move be? Is he prepared to escalate this conflict, risking everything in a game with no true escape? As resources dwindle, Putin must weigh his options carefully. The Kremlin's treachery turns to shaky radical responses. Asymmetric warfare becomes the path of least resistance, swirling in the shadows of cyber chaos and sabotage. Against a backdrop of past controversies involving vital infrastructure, the prospect of launching cyber attacks looms. Banking networks and communication lines become tantalizing targets for a regime clinging to power. However, every risky maneuver could unleash a chain reaction. Retaliation might plunge both sides into an all-out conflict, risking global stability. In this high-stakes chess game, where pieces are sacrificed for dominance, the outcome remains uncertain. What if the desperate tactics of a cornered bear draw the world into an irreversible spiral of war? Where does diplomacy end, and chaos begin? The clock ticks on as each side weighs the catastrophic costs of escalation. The lines are drawn, both sides hold their breath in anticipation of the next move. One thing is clear, the strategy for victory in this modern age is not merely about firepower but about outmaneuvering in the realm of economic strength and resilience. As Vladimir Putin finds himself ensnared, with options dwindling, the ultimate question remains, when all else fails, what is he willing to risk? The world watches closely as history unfolds, teetering on the edge of the unknown. As tensions escalated, Russia found itself teetering on the edge of a precarious precipice. Initiating asymmetric tactics, Putin jeopardized not only the West but also his own nation. In this high-stakes game, every action could signal an unmistakable declaration of war. It resembled a deadly round of Russian roulette, with multiple bullets in the chamber, each representing a dangerous escalation. The Kremlin's bombastic nuclear threats, once a display of strength, now increasingly revealed its desperation. This rhetoric, employed when feeling cornered, has transformed from a fearsome warning into a raw admission of vulnerability. By playing the nuclear card, Putin publicly acknowledged his diminishing options, reflecting a significant psychological unraveling rather than military prowess. The Kremlin's fierce declarations now rang like the final, feudal roars of a cornered beast, rather than the confident bravado of a superpower. Though they reverberate with fear and aggression, these threats signify more than noise, they herald the close of an era. An empire appears to be preparing its farewell, gasping in its final moments. As the ground shifts beneath Russia's feet, the international landscape may be on the brink of transformation, leaving viewers to wonder, what is the ultimate price for such a flawed game of dominance? The stakes have never been higher, and the tension is palpable. In a world where time is a critical factor, every move matters. Recent developments in the geopolitical landscape have painted a stark picture of an empire on the brink of collapse. Vladimir Putin finds himself on an unforgiving chessboard, where his pieces are dwindling. As he glances at his options, the looming threat of his nation's financial ruin becomes undeniable. Even the oligarchs in his inner circle whisper fears of economic catastrophe, aware that their empire has been exposed for all to see. The Kremlin's mantra of patience and endurance has shattered against the reality of staggering figures released by Canada, revealing an unexpected twist in this ongoing saga. Canada's bold $22 billion commitment isn't merely a gesture, it's a powerful declaration of resolve. It signals to the world that the West isn't weary. Instead, it has escalated the game, positioned to play to the very end. Every dollar is a calculated move in an economic marathon. While Russia exerts its last ounces of strength, it still has miles of uncertainty ahead. This strategy marks a new chapter in global conflict, the economic attrition doctrine, where victory lies not just in defeating enemy armies on the battlefield, but in crippling the financial systems that fuel those armies. Gone are the days of muscle and might being the sole indicators of strength. The West takes a calculated approach, seeking to drive Russia into an economic drain rather than a military defeat. This contemporary maneuver echoes the historical Lend-Lease programs of World War II, albeit in reverse. Instead of reconstruction, it aims to sustain a nation determined to endure chaos while preventing its inevitable economic downfall. The stakes have never been higher. The coin toss may reveal that the West is forcing Russia into a relentless spending war, a race it simply cannot win. As the Kremlin scrambles to produce new weaponry to replace its losses, it faces the unavoidable choice of further slashing budgets for its citizens' welfare, healthcare, and education. The last reserves are being consumed, and the West strangles Russia from within, without firing a single shot.
Experts predict that if the aggregate military and economic assistance from G7 nations surpasses 3 times Russia's annual military expenditure by the end of 2026, the once formidable war machine will falter for good.
How then will Putin respond to this devastating checkmate?
His potential moves seem sparse and grim, trapped in a web of poor decisions leading only to greater peril.
Retaliation may tempt him, but what weapon does he possess?
The energy leverage that once held sway has crumbled, with Europe swiftly pivoting away from reliance on Russian resources. The choices before him now, poor, unwise, or disastrous, only hasten the West's strategy of economic strangulation. The new game has begun, and the question remains, in this high-stakes battle of wills, who truly holds the upper hand? As the tides of war shifted against him, Vladimir Putin found himself with one desperate gamble left. Instead of traditional power plays with tanks and missiles, he banked on the assumption that the Western resolve would crumble before his military stockpile ran dry. He envisioned a realm of distractions, swayed voters, and the exhaustion that always follows prolonged conflict, believing time favored his stance. But suddenly, from an unexpected direction, a pivotal move emerged that reshaped the battlefield. Canada, a nation often underestimated, effectively rewrote the script on international aid. In a matter of weeks, it buckled down with a staggering $2.6 billion in financial support for Ukraine, just a taste of what was to come.
This would balloon to an astronomical total of $22 billion.
Dismissing this as mere financial assistance would be a grave error, akin to mistaking a nuclear missile for a child's fireworks. The brilliance of Canada's strategy lay not just in the amount given, but in the timing and tactical finesse behind it. We were witnessing the dawn of an unprecedented economic blitzkrieg. What set Canada apart was speed. Traditional aid often gets bogged down by red tape, with processes taking ages to navigate. But Canada tossed the norm aside. On August 24, during Ukraine's Independence Day festivities in Kyiv, Mark Carney unveiled a fresh military aid package exceeding $2 billion. Yet, this was merely the opening salvo. The relentless momentum didn't stop there. Just one day later, Canada added $500 million directly to a key NATO procurement list for U.S. weapons.
Quickly ramping up commitments.
This lightning-fast responsiveness marked a lifeline for Ukraine during its most critical hours, proving that this funding wasn't just another aid convoy, it functioned like a financial rapid reaction force. Kremlin analysts, expecting delays, were blindsided. Canada's swift action tore through their assumptions, launching a direct financial strike at the heart of Putin's protracted war strategy. Just imagine the chaos in the Kremlin as policymakers realized their miscalculations. With one move, Canada turned the iron grip of battle into a chaotic scramble, exposing the harsh reality that monetary power could dictate the war's outcome far more than brute force. How could Putin counter this move? As his troops counted bullets, the West was counting zeros, and in this calculation, the zeros were destined to prevail. What further twists awaited in this game of high-stakes power? The unfolding drama had only just begun. In a world where the stakes are continuously rising, Canada has thrown a monumental challenge at Vladimir Putin. With a staggering $22 billion commitment to Ukraine, this isn't just another financial aid package, it's a bold declaration that the West is resolute and ready to see this through. As the echoes of past battles fade, a new paradigm emerges, one where victory is less about military might and more about crippling an opponent's economy. Imagine the scene: Russian oligarchs, once confident in their fortress, whisper anxiously about a looming economic disaster. The Kremlin's long-standing narrative that time is on their side crumbles as hard numbers shift the narrative. The belief that the West will tire has been dismantled under the weight of Canada's financial strategy. Each day, the odds tilt further, and Putin finds himself at a table with only disastrous options left to play. So, how does a leader faced with imminent economic collapse respond? The battlefield is changing. Ukraine's fate teeters not only on the front lines of conflict but on the deeper strategy of economics. Each Canadian dollar plays a crucial role, enabling Ukraine to sustain its military and government functions as it battles for survival. Meanwhile, Russia, scrambling to replace losses on the battlefield, begins to bleed its economy dry, sacrificing the welfare of its citizens for the sake of war. What does this mean for Putin's next move? With his resources stretched thin, Russia risks diplomatic and economic failure. He has ample avenues for retaliation. But each step he takes may further entrench his position in the economic hellscape that Canada and its allies are molding. As the clock ticks, the world watches, holding its breath to see whether he will choose disaster or diplomacy.
Without a robust financial fortress, how long can Putin maintain a facade of strength? As Western nations band together, inflating their collective power, Russia finds itself struggling to catch up. The relentless financial push from Canada and its allies transforms the conflict, turning it into a game of endurance and resourcefulness. And as Russia pulls from its last reserves, the price of its impending defeat becomes alarmingly clear. What will the Kremlin's next desperate maneuver be? We are left to wonder. The ground has shifted beneath their feet, and the implications of their next steps could alter the course of history. As the winds of conflict began to shift against him, Vladimir Putin was left with a perilous gamble. This time, it wasn't about tanks and missiles. Instead, he relied on the belief that the Western resolve would fade before his arsenal ran out. He envisioned a scenario filled with distractions, restless voters, and the inevitable fatigue that long wars create. He thought time was on his side. But then, from an unexpected direction, a move came that would transform the battlefield entirely. Canada, often underestimated on the world stage, effectively rewritten the rules of international support within weeks, pledging a staggering $2.6 billion to Ukraine, a foretaste of a monumental $22 billion commitment. To view this solely as financial aid would be a monumental oversight, equivalent to mistaking a nuclear missile for mere fireworks. Canada's brilliance lay not only in the sheer amount but in its timing and strategic approach. We were witnessing the genesis of a groundbreaking economic blitzkrieg. What distinguished Canada was its incredible speed. Traditional forms of aid often drown in bureaucratic red tape, with delays stretching for months, even years. But Canada broke all norms. On August 24, during Ukraine's Independence Day in Kyiv, Mark Carney announced a remarkable military aid package worth over $2 billion. This was just the beginning. A single day later, Canada contributed an additional $500 million to NATO's priority procurement for U.S. weaponry. This rapid-fire response became a lifeline for Ukraine at its most critical moment. Proving this funding was not just another relief convoy, it acted like a financial rapid reaction force. Kremlin analysts, who had anticipated long delays, were caught off guard. Canada's swift action dismantled their predictions, launching a direct financial blow at the heart of Putin's prolonged war strategy. Picture the chaos erupting within the Kremlin as decision-makers grappled with their profound miscalculations. In one fell swoop, Canada transformed the battlefield into a state of turmoil, revealing the stark truth: monetary power could dictate the outcome of war more effectively than sheer military might. How could Putin possibly respond? As his forces focused on countable ammunition, the West was tallying zeros, and in this crucial arithmetic, the zeros were fated to triumph. But the unfolding drama revealed even greater complexities. Canada's intervention was just the first act in a play that would redefine power dynamics globally. The implications extended far beyond immediate military support, hinting at a broader clash between economic philosophies and international strategies. What unforeseen developments awaited in this chess game of high stakes? The plot was thickening, and the next move could change everything.